girl was kicked out of her house by her parents when they found out she was pregnant, but she turned her life around in a way that surprised everyone. Before the story begins, comment below which city you're watching the video from. We love getting to know our viewers. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more exciting stories. Enjoy the story and see you soon. Clara was sitting on the bed, her trembling hands holding the small pharmacy test. The two red lines were like silent screams in her chest, confirming what she had already feared. She was only 14, but she knew her life had just changed forever. Her room, once a refuge, now felt tight and oppressive. Outside, the usual sounds of the house contrasted with the chaos unfolding in her mind. With her heart racing, Clara knew she needed to tell her parents. Anna and Luis had always been strict. Their lives revolved around appearances, church parties, business dinners, and fake smiles for the neighbors. There was no room for failure, let alone for a scandal like this. Still, she had to speak. There was no way to hide the growing belly for much longer. Mom? Dad? Her voice was weak, almost a whisper. She found them in the living room, Luis reading the newspaper, Anna staring at her phone. They barely looked up. I need to talk to you. Luis sighed loudly, folding the newspaper with irritation. Anna just raised an eyebrow. Clara felt the weight of their judgment even before she began. I'm pregnant, she said, the words coming out in one breath. For a moment, the world seemed to freeze. Then, the explosion. How could you do this to us? Anna screamed, her voice echoing through the room. You've tarnished our family's name. Luis stood up, his face red with anger. Who is the father? Is he some delinquent? How dare you? We gave you everything, and you betray us like this. The words cut like knives, each accusation heavier than the last. Clara tried to explain, say it was a mistake, that she was sorry, but her words were drowned out by her parents shouting. Ina was crying in indignation, while Luis paced back and forth, rubbing his hands over his face as if trying to erase the news. You can't stay here. Luis's voice was cold, final. Clara's eyes widened, disbelieving. What? Dad, please, I have nowhere to go. And you're not staying here, ruining our family, Anna yelled, pointing to the door. Leave, Clara, now. It was in that moment that Clara realized there was no turning back. With tears streaming down her face, she ran to her room, grabbed a backpack and stuffed what she could. A change of clothes, some money she had saved, and the journal she used to confide her thoughts. The sound of doors slamming and her parents' hurried footsteps behind her only made everything feel more suffocating. Outside, the cold night air hit her like a slap. Clara looked back, perhaps hoping one of them would change their mind, would call her back. But the front door stayed shut, and the house lights went out. She was alone. With a broken heart, she began to walk, aimlessly, without a destination. The streets seemed deserted, and every shadow cast by the streetlights made her shrink in fear. Her mind was in turmoil. How had it come to this? She was a good student, had always done what was expected of her. But it only took one mistake, one night of impulsiveness, for everything to fall apart. Hours passed. Fatigue began to win over the cold, and Clara spotted a church in the distance, lit up like a beacon in the darkness. Driven by desperation, she entered the building. The atmosphere was quiet, almost solemn, and the smell of incense surrounded her. She fell to her knees in front of the altar, with warm tears running down her face. God, help me, she whispered, her voice faltering. The sound of footsteps echoed through the aisle, and Clara looked back, startled. A tall man with grey hair and a serene expression approached. It was Father Gabriel. Are you okay, my child? He asked, his voice calm but firm. Clara couldn't answer. She just cried, her face hidden in her hands. Father Gabriel knelt beside her, waiting patiently until she could speak. When she finally told her story, he listened without interrupting, his eyes conveying something she hadn't seen in hours: compassion. "Come, I'll help you," he said, gently lifting her up. That night, for the first time since everything happened, Clara felt a spark of hope. Clara followed Father Gabriel to a small room at the back of the church. It was simple, with a wooden table, 2 chairs, and a shelf full of religious books. He pulled out one of the chairs and motioned for her to sit. Though hesitant, Clara accepted, feeling the warm comfort of the room contrast with the sharp cold of the street outside. "I know you're scared," the priest began, sitting down across from her, "but I want you to know that you're safe here. You can tell me what happened." Clara hesitated. How could she put into words the chaos her life had become in such a short time? But the patience in Father Gabriel's gaze encouraged her. Between tears and sobs, she told him everything: the pregnancy test, the explosion of anger from her parents, the cruel words that still echoed in her mind. The priest listened attentively without judgment, nodding from time to time. "I'm so sorry for all of this, my child," he said once Clara finished. "No child should have to face something like this, but I promise I won't leave you alone." Clara looked at him, surprised. It was the first time that night someone had offered her help without asking anything in return. "Father, I don't know what to do. I have nowhere to go." He fell silent for a moment, his fingers interlaced in thought. Then he stood up and grabbed an old phone from a corner of the room. Clara heard him murmur something quickly, mentioning a place called Convento San Jose. When he hung up, he turned back to her. "There's a place where you can stay. It's a convent run by nuns. They take in young women in difficult situations like yours. It's a place of work, prayer, and peace. I'm sure you'll be welcome there." Clara didn't know what to say. As grateful as she was, the idea of living in a convent seemed so far removed from everything she knew. Still, Father Gabriel's steady gaze gave her a sense of trust. "Thank you, Father. Really," she said, wiping her tears. "Don't thank me yet, my child. The journey won't be easy, but I believe you'll find strengths you didn't even know you had." He led her to a small room at the back of the church where she could spend the night. The bed was simple, but to Clara it felt like a luxury after hours of wandering the streets. Before leaving, the priest handed her a tray with bread and tea. "Rest. Tomorrow will begin a new chapter." Clara couldn't fall asleep right away. Despite the exhaustion, her mind was flooded with thoughts. What if the convent was as strict as her parents? What if she couldn't care for the baby on her own? Doubts haunted her until, finally, sleep overcame her. The next morning, Father Gabriel woke Clara early. The convent was an hour away, and he had managed to borrow a car from one of the parishioners to take her. During the drive, he explained more about the place. "The sisters there are very kind, especially Sister Teresa. She has a generous heart and knows how to listen. I'm sure you two will get along." Clara just nodded, staring out the window. The urban landscape gave way to fields and trees, and the silence in the car was broken only by the sound of the engine. Finally, they arrived at the convent gate. It was an old building but well kept, with stone walls and colorful gardens surrounding it. Clara got out of the car, feeling small in front of the grandeur of the place. A nun appeared at the gate with a warm smile and a white veil that shimmered in the sun. "Father Gabriel, what a pleasant surprise," she said, hugging him. Then she turned to Clara. "And you must be the young woman he spoke of. Welcome, dear." "This is Sister Teresa," the priest explained. "She will take care of you from now on." Clara tried to smile, but her shyness held her back. Sister Teresa, however, seemed not to mind. She gently took Clara's hand and led her inside. "Come, dear. There's much you need to see. Here, you're not alone." Clara threw one last glance at Father Gabriel, who waved encouragingly before leaving. As she crossed the convent's gates, A mixture of relief and uncertainty filled her. She was beginning a new chapter, one that could be the salvation she so desperately needed. The sound of the convent doors closing behind Clara was both a relief and a reminder that her life had changed forever. She was now in an unfamiliar place, surrounded by people she barely knew. Sister Teresa's firm and welcoming hand guided her down the main corridor, where the scent of old wood mixed with the faint perfume of flowers coming from the gardens outside. "This will be your new home, at least for now," Sister Teresa said with a gentle smile. "Come, let me show you your room." Clara followed the nun to a small dormitory. It was simple, with a wooden bed, a modest wardrobe, and a window overlooking the garden. Despite its austerity, the room was clean and inviting. On the bed, a neatly folded wool blanket seemed to welcome her to rest. "It's not much, but I hope you'll feel comfortable here," Sister Teresa said. "We'll have dinner soon, but before that, I want to introduce you to the other sisters." Clara nodded shyly, still processing everything around her. Sister Teresa led her to the dining room, where a group of nuns was talking animatedly while setting the table. As soon as they entered, the chatter stopped, and all eyes turned to Clara. She felt her face flush. "Sisters, this is Clara. She'll be with us for a while. I hope you all treat her with the same kindness we received when we first came here," Sister Teresa announced. The nuns murmured words of welcome, but Clara noticed a few skeptical glances. One, in particular, Sister Beatrice, seemed to study her with some reservation. "I hope you understand that life here isn't easy, young lady," Sister Beatrice said in a serious tone. "We work hard and follow the rules. There's no room for laziness or rebellion." Clara lowered her head, feeling small under her critical gaze. Before she could respond, Sister Teresa intervened. "Let's give her time to adjust, Beatrice. We all have our struggles, don't we?" Clara gave a grateful glance to the older nun, who then led her back to the table for dinner. The meal was simple but delicious. Vegetable soup, fresh bread, and hot tea. Throughout the meal, Clara remained silent, observing the nuns discuss their tasks for the day and plans for the next. Despite the warm welcome from some, she felt the weight of being a stranger in this environment. After dinner, Sister Teresa took Clara on a tour of the convent. She showed her the garden, where the nuns grew their own food, and the small sewing workshop, where they made clothes to sell in the community. Clara was impressed by the self-sufficiency of the place, but also intimidated by the thought of integrating into this way of life. "Tomorrow, you'll begin learning our routines. Here, everyone contributes in some way. Working with your hands can be therapeutic, you know," Sister Teresa said, her eyes gleaming. Clara smiled but was nervous inside. She had never worked before. Her life until then had been filled with school and her parents' strict rules. The idea of adapting to something so different seemed daunting, but at the same time, challenging. When she finally returned to her room, Clara sat on the bed, looking out the window. Outside, the sky was dotted with stars, and the silence of the convent was almost complete. For the first time in days, she felt a sense of peace. But that peace was quickly replaced by fear of the future. She gently stroked her belly, feeling the weight of the responsibility she carried. "I can do this," she whispered to herself, "for me and for the baby." The next morning, before the sun rose over the horizon, Clara was awakened by the soft sound of the convent bell. Sister Teresa was at the door, smiling. "Good morning, Clara. It's time to begin." The day started with a mass in the chapel, where the nuns prayed in soft voices. Clara, though not religious, felt an unexpected calm during the ritual. Afterward, she was taken to the garden to help with the planting. Her hands, accustomed only to school notebooks and books, quickly became covered in dirt. Despite the initial discomfort, she felt something new. a sense of purpose. At the end of the day, tired but proud of herself, Clara realized that perhaps she could find something in this place that she had never had before, a chance to start over. Time at the convent seemed to pass slowly, but at the same time Clara felt as if she were in a constant race. The weeks went by, filled with hard work and moments of introspection as she tried to adjust to the simple, quiet life that the convent walls imposed. Her belly, which was now starting to show, reminded her constantly of the reality of her situation. Clara was getting used to the routine, but the pressure of being so young and, on top of that, pregnant, never seemed to ease. She helped with the convent's tasks, but always with the weight of the future and the uncertainty of how her life would unfold. Sister Teresa, who had become both her guide and friend, watched her closely, sensing the moments when Clara appeared more withdrawn. It was on an especially cold morning that Clara's pregnancy began to manifest more noticeably. She was working in the garden with the other nuns when she felt a sharp pain in her stomach. She tried to ignore it, but the pain quickly became unbearable and she bent over, pale and gasping for breath. Sister Teresa was nearby and quickly noticed what was happening. With a speed that surprised Clara, the nun helped her up and guided her inside, where she made her lie down on the bed. "Stay calm, Clara. I'm going to call Sister Maria. She's a nurse and can help," Sister Teresa said, her voice firm yet gentle. Clara was in a panic. What was happening? It was too early for the baby to be born. It couldn't be. She knew it was hard, but the feeling of being alone and vulnerable was overwhelming. A few minutes later, Sister Maria arrived, bringing with her a comforting sense of security. The sister, a woman with gentle hands and a natural calm, examined Clara carefully. "Don't worry, dear. It seems like just a strong cramp, very common in the early stages of pregnancy. I'll give you something to ease the pain, and it will pass soon," Sister Maria reassured her. Clara felt a momentary relief, but the worry still lingered. What if it was something more serious? What if the baby wasn't okay? The uncertainty consumed her. After a few minutes, Clara began to feel better. Sister Teresa sat beside her, looking at her with tenderness. "You've been so strong, Clara. I know this is a difficult time for you, but remember, you're not alone. I, and all the other sisters, are here to help you." Clara looked at her, her eyes still a little watery. She had never imagined that a convent would be the place where she'd find such deep support, but something within her opened up more and more each day. Perhaps because here she wasn't seen only as a pregnant girl, but as someone who deserved to be cared for and loved. In the days that followed, Clara threw herself even more into her work at the convent. The pain from the incident passed, but the fear of being such a young mother never left her. She knew that when the baby was born, she would face new challenges. How would she care for a baby without the resources that older mothers had? How would she face the world with her new reality? The nuns, however, were always by her side. Sister Teresa taught her how to sew, work in the garden, and even prepare simple meals. Clara learned that despite her youth, she had strengths she didn't know she had. Each step she took toward becoming a mother was also a step toward her independence. And so, little by little, Clara began to understand what it meant to be a mother, even before the baby was born. She often imagined herself looking to the future with more confident eyes, wondering what she would say to Matteo, the name she had already chosen for her son. She dreamed of a future different from the one her parents wanted for her, a future where she could raise her child with love and care without the fear of rejection. That convent, which at first had seemed like just a temporary shelter, was now becoming her new home, a place where she could finally rebuild her life. Each day felt like a small miracle. She was finding herself becoming stronger and, above all, beginning to believe that she was capable of doing whatever it took to give Matteo a life full of love and security. She didn't know what the future held, But looking at her belly, she felt that somehow everything would be okay. Clara sat in her room at the convent, absorbed in a simple task, sewing a small prayer mantle for the chapel. The soft sunlight filtered through the windows, and the tranquility of the convent, which she had come to cherish, surrounded her. But today, something was about to change. She was focused on the fabric when a nun entered, holding a letter. It was a letter from her mother, Anna. Clara felt a knot form in her stomach at the sight of her mother's name, but her heart pounded in her chest. Sister Teresa noticed the tension and approached with a gentle smile. "Don't worry, Clara. You don't have to open it right away if you don't want to," she said, sensing the discomfort of the young woman. But Clara didn't have the courage to wait. She took the letter, feeling the weight of the decision to open it. As she tore open the envelope, the words written inside were simple, but heavy with emotion. "Clara, I know what we did was cruel. I know that nothing we say can erase the pain we caused you. But I am sick, Clara, very sick. Perhaps if you could, you would give me the honor of seeing you before it is too late. With love, Mom." Clara read and reread those words, her body trembling. What did this mean? Anna, her mother, who had cast her out without hesitation, was now calling for her? What did she want? And most importantly, how was Clara supposed to react? She felt a mixture of anger and sadness, a pain that seemed endless. "Clara, dear, you must make the decision that feels right to you. But remember, forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. It means giving yourself the freedom to move forward," Sister Teresa said with a calm and firm gaze. Clara knew she had to make a decision. Her anger was strong, but what made her hesitate was the pain of losing the opportunity to understand what had really happened between her and her parents. And, above all, she felt a responsibility that in some way weighed on her. Matteo, her son, deserved to know if any reconciliation was possible. She knew that by deciding to go, she would be facing herself. The next day, Clara made a decision. She would go. She would visit them, even if it was painful. Sister Teresa helped prepare her for what was to come. Clara said her goodbyes to the convent with a mix of relief and anguish, carrying Matteo in her arms. He was only 7 now, but already showed his curiosity and joy for life. He, who knew little of what had happened, was about to encounter a new chapter in his life. The journey to her parents' house was silent. Clara's heart was tight, her body tense. When she finally arrived at the door, the same house she had been forced to leave years ago, her body seemed paralyzed. She took a deep breath and rang the bell. The familiar sound echoed, and a sense of discomfort flooded over her. Luis, her father, appeared at the door. His eyes were more aged, but the same rigidity that had always been present in his gaze was still there. "Clara," he said, his voice barely recognizable. "You came." Clara looked at him, unsure of what to say. The atmosphere in the house was thick with unresolved tension. Finally, she managed to speak, her voice firmer than she had expected. "I came to see my mother. She's very sick, isn't she?" Luis stepped aside, allowing Clara to enter. The inside of the house was darker, as if the years of absence had left a deep mark. Anna, her mother, was lying on the couch in the living room, pale and frail. When she saw Clara, her eyes filled with tears. "Clara," she whispered, her voice weak. "I know I hurt you. I don't know if I can ask for forgiveness, but I miss you." Clara looked at her mother, trying to contain the anger rising inside her. Anna seemed so different now, so vulnerable, but Clara didn't know how to react. She knew the pain of her rejection was still too fresh in her heart. "I don't know if I can forgive everything that happened, everything we did to you, to the baby." Anna tried to speak, but her voice faltered. Clara looked at her son, Matteo, who was there watching everything with curiosity but not understanding the complexity of the situation. "I don't know either, Mom. I don't know if what happened can simply be erased, but—" Clara paused, her voice breaking a little. "I brought Matteo for you to meet him. He's my son." She put Matteo on the floor, and he immediately walked over to Anna. Her mother's weakness was replaced by surprise as she saw the lively boy, so different from what she remembered. She embraced him gently, and something, perhaps the beginning of healing, seemed to start. Clara watched, still with a tight heart. She knew that this reunion, though painful, could be the start of something new, but she also understood it wouldn't be easy. It was only the beginning of a path she would have to walk alone, with her son, and with the scars of the past. The air in Clara's parents' house was heavy. Every corner of the house seemed to hold an untold story, a secret the years had tried to hide. Clara, despite everything, felt like a stranger in this environment. This was no longer her home, nor her family. Yet here she was, facing her parents, trying to find some shred of understanding in a past marked by pain and abandonment. Anna was sitting in a chair near the window, frail and exhausted. The illness, which at first had seemed like nothing more than an excuse for their reunion, now showed its true face, a woman on the brink of death, trying to hold on to whatever little remained of her life. Clara observed her, but didn't know how to deal with it. She still felt anger, but a type of anger that seemed to come from a place of sadness, not revenge. Luis stood in the corner of the room with his arms crossed. He had always been like that, rigid, imposing, and it seemed time hadn't changed him at all. The tension in the air was palpable, and Clara could feel every unsaid word, every repressed emotion in the room. "Clara," Anna began, her voice still weak. "I know things between us were never easy. I know I hurt you deeply when you needed me the most, but you need to understand that—" She paused, her breathing becoming more labored. "I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to handle what was happening." Clara felt a wave of confusion wash over her. What did she mean? She didn't know what to do. How could her mother, the woman who was supposed to protect her, not know what to do when she needed help the most? "What do you mean by that, Mom?" Clara asked, her voice firm but full of pain. "You kicked me out of the house without thinking, without even listening to me. How can you say now that you didn't know what to do?" Anna closed her eyes, as if trying to gather strength to continue. Luis, on the other side of the room, seemed uncomfortable, but he didn't move. "I didn't want this to happen," Anna started, her eyes watery. "But your father—" She looked at Luis, and he stared at her with an intensity that almost made Clara uncomfortable. "He didn't give me a choice. You were pregnant, Clara. And he couldn't bear the idea that our family would be seen differently. He cared about his image, about what others would think." Clara turned to Luis, hoping to hear some explanation, some words that would relieve the weight of these revelations. But he said nothing. He simply kept his gaze fixed on Anna, as though he didn't want to be a part of the conversation. "I couldn't stand the pressure," Anna continued, now looking at Clara with deep regret. "I tried everything to hide the shame, but that only drove us further apart. And I lost you. I lost my daughter. And I don't know how to ask for your forgiveness for that." Clara felt the pain in her words, but she also felt something new. A small understanding that what had happened wasn't just about her. Her parents were dealing with their own fears, their own failures, and that led them to make wrong choices. But she didn't know if that would be enough for her to forgive them. "So, all of this was because of reputation, because you and Dad cared more about what others thought than about me?" Clara asked, anger rising again. Luis finally spoke. His voice, usually authoritative, sounded more tired, more broken. It wasn't just that, Clara. I made mistakes, but fear made me act that way. The fear of losing everything we built. I couldn't see what really mattered. Clara felt the weight of his words. The anger was still there, but now there was something deeper, something more complex. She wanted to believe that their pain was real, that they were trying to change, but the path to forgiveness was long and twisted. She knew the wound was still open, and words alone wouldn't be enough to erase everything that had happened. Then Matteo, who had been playing quietly in the corner of the room, walked over to Clara and clung to her leg. He looked at his grandparents with curiosity, but not understanding the gravity of the moment, and innocently asked, "Grandma, Grandpa, are you going to be okay? Are you going to take care of me too?" Matteo's simple question cut through the heavy silence in the room. Clara looked at him, and for a moment she saw everything again. Matteo's smile, his purity, the hope still shining in his eyes. This was what she wanted most. She wanted him to have a life free of the shadows of her past. She wanted him, in the future, to never have to carry the weight of a broken family. Anna, with tears in her eyes, opened her arms and embraced Matteo with tenderness, as if he were her last chance for redemption. She whispered, "I will take care of you, my angel. I will try to do what I can." Clara watched the reunion between her parents and her son, feeling a mixture of emotions. The pain was still there, but maybe, just maybe, there was a possibility of reconstruction, even if it would take a long time. She didn't know what the future held, but at that moment, she made a decision. Forgiveness wouldn't be to erase the past, but to give her the chance to move forward. "I don't know if I can forgive you right now," Clara said, her voice firm yet soft. "But I am willing to try. For me and for Matteo." And with those words, the cycle of pain, shame, and loss began to be broken, even if slowly. The future was still uncertain, but Clara knew that at least now she had the possibility to rewrite her story. The silence that filled the room seemed heavier than ever. The minutes dragged on slowly, as if time itself was aware that something irreparable was about to happen. Clara felt a tightness in her chest as she looked at her mother, still fragile on the couch, her face pale and her eyes tired, but with a silent hope that seemed to resist the pain. The conversation had progressed, and the weight of what had been said still echoed in everyone's hearts. Luis, though trying to hide his emotion, couldn't disguise the exhaustion that now reflected in every movement. Anna, the woman Clara had once believed to be the cause of her pain, now seemed to embody fragility itself. The illness had made her vulnerable, and Clara saw in her the image of a woman who, in the end, only wanted to repair the wrongs she had committed. But the moment of truth was approaching. Anna didn't have much time left. Clara felt the sadness of an imminent farewell, but also a sense of relief, as if a burden was finally being acknowledged. Anna, with effort, slowly stood up from the couch, supported by a cushion and the faint strength of her willpower. Clara, instinctively, stepped closer and held her hand. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and Clara saw in her mother something she hadn't noticed before: genuine regret. She was the same woman who had abandoned her, yes, but now she was someone who, perhaps too late, understood what her daughter had lived through. "Clara." Anna's voice was weak, almost inaudible. I don't know how to thank you for being here. I know what I did can't be forgiven, but I tried, didn't I? I made so many mistakes, my daughter." Clara felt her mother's words pierce her soul. It wasn't easy to believe in an apology after so much suffering, but something inside her told her that maybe time had been cruel to both of them. She looked at Anna and spoke, her voice trembling. "You made mistakes, Mom, but that doesn't mean I can't try to understand. I don't know if I'll ever truly forgive, but..." She paused, looking at Matteo, who was standing beside her, completely unaware of the gravity of the moment, but still the reason for everything Clara was doing now. She was trying to build a new story for him, a story free of the mistakes of the past. But for him, I want to try. For you too, Mom, because you are my mother, and that still means something to me. Anna cried, but it wasn't just the cry of illness. It was a cry of acknowledgement, of shame, but also of hope. Clara could see now that love, though distorted, still existed there. It was fragile, but it was real. Time was running out, and Anna knew it. She looked at Clara's son, who was sitting on the floor distractedly playing with a toy. She watched him for a moment, and her eyes lit up with a sad smile. You brought the light back into my life, Clara. This boy, Anna looked at Matteo with tenderness. He will help me go in peace. Clara couldn't hold back the tears. She wished her mother's words had been different, that there had been more time, that there had been more love to give. But what was happening here in this moment was a silent farewell, a farewell without grand gestures or elaborate words, just the acknowledgement of the pain and the attempt to repair what was already broken. Anna looked at her husband, Luis, who stood at a distance, trying in some way to maintain his rigid posture, but the pain he too felt could not be hidden. Luis, Anna whispered, calling him with the frailty of someone who knew they wouldn't have another chance. Forgive me, I know I wasn't the wife you expected. I know I made mistakes too, but please, try to be better for her, for our daughter. Don't let pride destroy what little we still have. Luis didn't respond immediately. He stood still, his head lowered, absorbing the words that seemed to pierce his chest. But then something changed. He took a step toward Anna, slowly, as if giving up something he had carried for a long time. He knelt beside her and took her hand. I also, he began, his voice breaking, I also made mistakes, but you will always be my wife. Even if it's too late for both of us, I'll try to be better for Clara. For Matteo, I'll try. Clara's heart felt heavy, but at the same time, she felt a strange sense of peace. Something was being resolved here. A knot was being undone. It wasn't complete healing, but it was a beginning. Anna, now almost out of strength, looked one last time at her daughter and son-in-law with a tired smile on her face. I just want you to be happy, Clara. Even though I couldn't give you that. Take care of Matteo. Take care of him with all the love you have, because he is the future of everything. With one final sigh, Anna closed her eyes. Clara watched her, and although she didn't know if she would ever be able to fully forgive, she knew that this moment would be what allowed her to begin letting the past go. The farewell wasn't just to Anna, but also to a cycle of pain Clara had carried for so long. Luis, standing beside Clara, took her hand. He didn't say anything more, but the gesture spoke louder than words ever could. Their journey was far from over, but at that moment, Clara felt that she had finally taken the first step to move forward. The morning was cool as Clara took her last walk through the convent garden. The sun had yet to rise fully, but the soft light filtering through the trees seemed to bring a sense of renewal. The nuns were already busy with their morning tasks, and the place, though peaceful, was infused with an energy that Clara now associated with her true home. She gazed at the small chapel in the center of the convent, where she had often sought refuge in moments of pain and uncertainty. The silence there, within the sacred walls, had been the foundation where she found the strength to rebuild her life. The nuns, especially Sister Teresa, had welcomed her as a daughter, offering the unconditional support Clara never knew she needed, but always had. Clara placed a hand over her belly, where little Matteo was now playing with some flowers. He was becoming more curious every day, always asking about everything around him. That boy, so full of life, so innocent, reminded her of all she had lost, but also of all she had gained. And now, she had to leave. Life outside the convent awaited her, but farewells were never easy. Clara didn't quite know how to express all the gratitude she felt toward the women who, without asking anything in return, had helped her piece her life back together. She knew that without them, she wouldn't be who she was at this moment. The morning advanced, and Clara felt the urge to visit for the last time the place where she had spent so many hours reflecting and healing, the small garden where she met Sister Teresa for long conversations, where they spoke of the challenges and victories of each day. When Clara entered the room where Sister Teresa was, the nun was organizing the bookshelves, but stopped when she saw her. Sister Teresa's expression was gentle as always, but there was a tension in the air. They both knew this moment was coming. "Clara, my daughter," Sister Teresa said with her calm, comforting voice. "How are you feeling?" Clara gave a sad, yet genuine smile. The weight of the farewell was there, but there was also something lighter in her heart, something she hadn't felt before. The forgiveness, the lessons learned, the unconditional support of the nuns, all of that was now part of who she was, and she was ready to move on. I'm ready, sister," Clara replied, her voice full of conflicting emotions. "I'm ready to leave the convent and go with Matteo. I feel like now I can do this on my own." Sister Teresa looked at her with a gentle smile, but her eyes were full of compassion. She approached Clara and hugged her. It was a warm embrace, full of affection, as if the nun knew that although Clara was leaving, she would never be alone. "You will always have a place here, Clara," Sister Teresa said softly. "This convent was your home, but the world outside is also yours. No matter what happens, you will always be our daughter, our sister. Matteo will also be a part of us." Clara couldn't hold back her tears. Sister Teresa's words touched her soul in a way she couldn't explain. She took a deep breath and with a smile replied, "Thank you, sister. I will never forget what you did for me, or for Matteo. I felt like part of a family again, and for that I am eternally grateful." Sister Teresa looked at her with pride in her eyes. "You are a strong woman, Clara. Life hasn't been easy for you, but you found within yourself the strength to move forward. You don't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. What you've done so far, through all the adversity, is already more than many would have been capable of." Clara sighed, feeling the weight of each of Sister Teresa's words, but also the lightness of acceptance. She knew that from that moment on, she and Matteo would build their own path. It wouldn't be an easy path, but it would be theirs. The sound of the chapel bells signaled that it was time for Mass to begin, and Sister Teresa looked at Clara one last time with an expression that conveyed a clear message. "Now, it's your turn to live." Clara smiled once more and turned toward the door. Matteo followed her, running to catch up, and as she stepped out of the convent, Clara felt something inside her. It was as if the wind were at her back, pushing her toward the new life awaiting her. No longer a lost teenager, but a determined mother, ready to fight for the future of the child she loved so much. As she walked, the sound of the bells behind her rang, and in that moment, Clara knew that the convent would always be with her, in her heart. She was saying goodbye, but she carried with her everything she had learned there. It wasn't just the end of one phase of her life, but the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter she would write, with Matteo by her side, in a world that, though challenging, now seemed within her reach. And as the convent faded behind her, Clara looked toward the horizon and saw that despite the difficulties, hope was still there, ahead. The future was still uncertain, but she was stronger than ever, ready to face it with her head held high. The train was almost empty on that cold morning. Clara and Matteo sat by the window, watching the city move further away as the train advanced toward an uncertain future. The destination was still unclear to her, but something inside Clara told her that, despite all the pain of the past, she finally held the key to starting over. With Matteo by her side, she knew she could face any challenge life threw her way. The little boy, with his messy brown hair and curious eyes, was absorbed in a simple toy he had brought from the convent. Clara looked at him with an indescribable love, feeling a wave of gratitude for everything he represented in her life. He was the most precious gift life had given her, the reason she kept going, the strength to move forward. The train rocked gently as the landscape rushed by outside the window. Clara thought about everything that had happened so far, the pain of rejection from her parents, the tough moments of being alone and pregnant, the tears shed in the long nights at the convent, and finally the reconciliation with her mother. She knew there were still scars, but she also knew that forgiveness had given her a sense of relief she had never imagined possible. But now she was ready to build something new. She didn't know exactly what life awaited her, but she knew she had something that could never be taken away. Her determination and the unconditional love for Matteo. And with that, she had everything she needed. The train made a brief stop at a small station, and Clara stood up, adjusting the backpack on her shoulders. When she returned to the seat, she saw Matteo holding a piece of paper. Clara chuckled softly. "What do you have there, my love?" "A drawing," Matteo replied with a mischievous smile, handing her the paper. He had made a simple yet beautiful drawing, a bright sun, a tree, and two small figures holding hands. Clara sat down and looked closely. It was her and Matteo, standing by the tree, smiling brightly. The sun above shone strong, as if it symbolized the hope he brought into her life. Clara's heart tightened, but at the same time, a sense of peace filled her chest. That was all she needed: love, hope, and a future to build. The train continued its journey, and the scenery gradually changed. But inside Clara, a feeling of renewal took over. She knew the future would still bring challenges, but now she was stronger. With forgiveness in her heart and the certainty that she was no longer alone, she felt ready to conquer the world, for herself and for Matteo. Their journey had just begun. There was no more fear, only the certainty that together, mother and son, they could face any storm that came their way. Clara's love for Matteo was her greatest strength, and with that, she knew she could build a future full of happiness and stability for him, far from the mistakes of the past. When the train finally reached their destination, Clara stood up, took Matteo's hand, and stepped off, looking around. The city was new to them, but it didn't scare her anymore. She didn't need anything more than Matteo, and the confidence that together they could build a new life, away from the shadows of the past. They walked together through the station toward the unknown, but Clara felt a warmth in her chest. It was the warmth of hope, of a new beginning. The past was behind them, and the future was a blank page, ready to be written. And with Matteo by her side, Clara knew the words she would write would be those of a mother who had overcome everything, ready to offer her son the life he deserved, a life full of love, peace, and above all, hope. And as she moved forward into this new chapter of her life, with eyes shining with determination, Clara knew that what lay ahead would be challenging. But she was more than ready. She was no longer alone. She had everything she needed. Clara and Matteo were finally alone, with no more shadows from the past hovering over them. The sky, now clear and cloudless, seemed to reflect the new phase beginning in their lives. The new city, with its busy streets and tall buildings, felt both strange and familiar at the same time, but Clara felt that the world was now within her reach. Nothing could stop her anymore. They settled into a small apartment, simple but cozy. It was modest, but it had everything they needed to start anew, a place where they could finally put down roots. The feeling of having a home, after so many years of uncertainty and rejection, brought Clara an unexpected peace. She cared for Matteo with immeasurable love, always attentive to his little details, his smiles, his curious looks. He was the center of her world. The job Clara found wasn't easy, but she didn't mind. Her time at the convent had taught her to be resilient and grateful for the small victories. She knew there was still much to learn, that the road ahead would be challenging, but the difference now was that she was willing to face it with courage. And with each step she took, Clara felt stronger. The pain from the past, though still present, no longer had the power to dominate her. She remembered the words of Sister Teresa, the words that echoed in her mind whenever she felt weak. "You are stronger than you think, Clara. Believe in your strength." Now, she believed. There were difficult days, of course. Sometimes Clara felt the weight of the responsibility of being a mother while also trying to rebuild herself. But she knew that her love for Matteo was the fuel that kept her moving forward. Every time she looked at him, her heart filled with gratitude and determination. Matteo, for his part, was also blossoming. He was growing fast, always happy, always curious. His laughter, even in the midst of difficulties, was the daily reminder that despite everything, there was happiness and lightness in Clara's life. The little boy was adapting to the new environment, and Clara couldn't have been more proud of him. One day, while walking in the park, Clara stopped in front of a large, imposing tree. She stood there for a moment observing it and then looked at Matteo, who was sitting beside her, admiring the same tree with wide, curious eyes. It was as if, seeing that tree, Clara saw a reflection of her own journey, full of ups and downs, of struggles and triumphs, but always growing, always getting stronger. Matteo then pointed to the tree with a smile and said, "Mum, I think we're like that tree, right? Growing and getting stronger every day." Clara smiled, moved. Those simple words from Matteo, so innocent, were truer than she could ever imagine. They truly were like that tree. They had weathered the storm, and now they were ready to blossom. Yes, my love, we are like that tree, and we will keep growing together. Matteo's words echoed in her mind as they walked back home. Clara didn't know exactly what the future held for her and Matteo, but she felt that, with him by her side, anything was possible. They had built a solid foundation, a life that, despite all the hardships, was full of love, hope, and strength. Now, more than ever, Clara felt that forgiveness, love, and courage were the tools with which she could rebuild her life. She knew that while the past couldn't be erased, she had the power to write the future, and that future was full of promises of happiness. In the end, she realized that the true victory wasn't in defeating obstacles, but in learning to live with them, transforming them into strength. And with Matteo by her side, she knew there were no limits to what they could achieve together. As they walked down the street, Clara felt invincible. The future was now an open field, waiting to be filled with their choices, their dreams, and above all, their love for Matteo. And with that love, she knew nothing could stop them. They were ready to face anything life put in their path. With a heart full of hope and eyes set on the horizon, Clara finally felt at peace. The past no longer defined her. She had forgiven, restarted, and above all, learned to love herself. And with Matteo by her side, she knew their journey was just beginning. And so we come to the end of this incredible journey of Clara and her son Matteo's overcoming. We saw how, despite the difficulties, the power of love and forgiveness were the keys for her to restart her life and build a future full of hope. A story of courage, growth, and above all, the certainty that we are never alone when we have love in our hearts. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What did you think of Clara's reaction when she reunited with her parents? Do you believe that forgiveness can really heal such deep wounds? Leave your opinion in the comments, as I love hearing what you think. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more videos like this, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you won't miss any more touching content like this. Your interaction is so important for us to keep bringing stories that touch everyone's hearts. Thank you for watching until the end, and see you in the next video.